I'd like to share an insight during the first meeting that I had with dear Constantine, which was in Chennai, India, 1998. It was a conference that was hosted by Master Choa. It was a pranic healing conference where dear Mary was there, Bob Hertz was there, and so we gathered together, and dear Constantine at that time in 1998 was sharing the insights of the early beginnings of the EPI, which was then called the GDV, EPI for electrophoton imaging. And now Bernie and myself, during a discussion, we said, aren't we at the epi, which is, aren't we at the epicenter, from where we stream waves of coherence, and we imprint these waves of coherence so that the enrichment and the empowerment that will infuse into each and every one can be not only affirmed, but also lived, celebrated, educated, and transform, hence, the collective presence to the intrinsic knowing of why we are here. As dear Ramana Maharishi conveyed, guide me to my highest purpose. And keep yourself in that presence and focus. So that is very simple. For us, it's the detailed work. The correlates that really brought Constantine and Krishna together was, I was sharing a paper on the use of essential oils and certain specific oils on the calibration of the energy field at that time from a Vedic perspective, and the application of the oils in this pattern through the olfactory, and the resonant harmonics that these resonances of the oils then convey to our field, which we reference as chakras. And for us, for myself, growing up in India, there's a simple paragraph in which we've been well imprinted with, and that is, what is within us is perfection, what is without is imperfection. The outer world can have perfection only when the inner world inspires, guides, molds, and shapes the outer world. So with that knowing, we've got some wonderful work to do, don't we not? So there you are, Constantine and myself. We then met after our talks, etc. And the first thing that came out was Constantine says to me, I have been looking for one guy who was involved in plant energies. So Krishna shows up. So what do? We just play around, and we do a lot of studies with a lot of folks in the medical field. And also at the same time observing that we can observe the nature of a thought and observe the response that a thought will cascade into the field. I said, let's explore this. And let's explore what also will occur if we were to toss a thought that can cause a perturbation inside a space. And this is really to reference is how locked in are we to an ego. That is, I am doing it, me that is doing it. So, of course, I like to play with such things, because ultimately it is the dissolving of that attachment which really enhances our potential of creativity, does it not? To the fullest, to the fullest. And that's the space from where we came from. So we met, we did a lot of studies, and then I came back here and went to a first AHMA conference where dear Len, Dr. Len Wisniewski, was the chair of this conference. So as Len shared with you earlier, what took place during that time, and one of Len's responses was, I want to get one of those units. And, and it was not about getting a unit. It was to inform the qualitative value of the science so that the presence of this can be brought to the field here, where, of course, knowing that the nature and the quality of education that one is imprinted with is very much in a very linear model, And the moment we integrate and we grow up with an integrative model, as the earlier quotation of what is within us is perfection. So seamlessly to interface these two was the passion. So that was what I shared with dear Len, who instantaneously recognized the value. And hence from there, dear Len initiated and brought together Constantine so that he could now give lectures to various beings of science from NASA, from Hopkins, from Walter Reed, and all these other areas at his clinic center when it was in Bethesda, no? In Bethesda. So that developed from the early 2000s, and the continuation of Krishna's involvement with the use of EPI has been to three simple phrases, is to educate, to enrich, and empower. And if we can harmonize all these fields into a synthesis, what are we doing? We are enriching all of life's stations, are we not? So that has been the overview of how the GDV, the EPI GDV is applied. And now, of course, these two lovely beings over here, please, I would love you to give a hand because they are bright students. Lucy Robertson is a student of physics at University of New Mexico in Taos and has been gifted with the opportunity to intern because we have started an institute in Taos called the Institute for Science, Spirituality, and Sustainability with two other dear colleagues, Gary Schwartz and Matti Hewlett. And of course, dear Constantine, dear Len, dear Bernie are all in our board of advisors. And we have another Dr. Sam Byrne, who is also here, is in our board of advisors, and we welcome all, because this is about a field presence. We don't do things singularly, we do what we do in a collective, because at that space of the collective is where we inform. And we know that, because and Constantine, as you have seen, we have shared and done studies of how we inform and imprint in a field presence, how we can stimulate water that is even 5,000, 10,000 miles away. So we know. Dear William Tiller has also supported a lot of these experiments. So, and that is dear Lucy, and then my dear daughter Ariana is also here, who has just finished her academic in Northern California and is now very much focused upon coming and joining us at the Institute to support the further endeavors to which we are all here collectively. So the insights that I've put together in this little presentation is not only data, some of it may cross-reference with what Constantine has shown, but very minor, but more so that a qualitative, cumulative presence of, from individual applications of beings who have come and had explorations with myself at our institute in Taos, which is where I'm based, is what I'd like to share. To reference some very, very key and simple points. And that is, can a simple process provide an outcome that will be supportive to the intrinsic well-being of each and every one? So that's the question. So with that thought, the information that is then gleaned from the data of the fingers is brought together, and I focus a lot on the chakras. How many of you, I think everyone here is quite familiar with chakras, yes? Can I have a hand raising to have an affirmation to the process, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. So for us, when I say for us, from having grown up in a Vedic background, the inner content of what is represented in the chakras, because the level of detail that Constantine's mathematicians in the algorithms that they compute collectively references also not only the mental, emotional state, of where a person may be, and also what are the areas that can then benefit from strengthening by simple applications. And I use the word simple, inspired by dear Einstein's. Let's bring everything to the simple, but not simpler. So with that thought in mind, all this approach is focused. So, sweetie pie, maybe. Thank you. So click again. Yeah, next one. Because as you click, you'll see. So this is one of dear Constantine. So we can see that the stages of our evolution to where we now sit in front of a terminal and we compute and we have a lot of data gathering which we then share. Next, please. So these are explorations which we'll now accomplish in the second half, is the sensing of the fields. And we know that having also traveled extensively and bringing back samples of water, samples of soil, samples of leaves from centers where has been the area of the infinite Buddhas travels, and the Bodhi tree that has been brought from Bodh Gaya and now planted in Bangkok, planted in areas like outside of Cambodia, outside of Myanmar, and huge pagodas which were built with the very same tree that under where dear Gautama sat to be the Buddha mind. So I bring back all this and to observe what does the data show? What does the information show? Because to me, this is very vital. Even though there may not be any more invocations that go on in some of these areas, like in Cambodia, Angkor Wat. How many of you have been to Angkor Wat? So we know in Angkor, going inside there, of course, now there is just some monks who walk with their joysticks and ask for some donations. But the soil there, the information from the plants that grow around, what do they carry? What do they show? Let's explore it. There's no judgment. There's just pure observation, which is what, again, my dear colleague Gary talks about, is if it's real, we can see it. If it's fake, we can see the mistake. So as explorers, researchers, let's do that. So we observe the nature of a conditioned mind so that it doesn't fall into a structure to say, I know, here is an evaluation. But we are continuously learning, are we not? As Constantine shared, the width of the electromagnetic spectrum, we are just ranging within certain bandwidths of the spectrum. So here is an enhancement. As our sciences and technologies continue to evolve, we will realize greater potentials within us. And that's where a lot of our research now is being directed, especially with Dr. Eric Pearl, the Reconnection Group, which we have been doing research for about 2.5 years. Gary has been doing this since the turn of the century. Dear Tiller has been doing research for about 5-6 years. So now that we have this meta amounts of data, we are observing how they interface with one another. The data that Gary has, the data that Tiller has, the data that Constantine and myself have observed. So I will also show some of that sequencing of information.